You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Belize storm and action in the Pacific and also the Indian Ocean on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 19th. And this is a live Tropical Weather Bulletin featuring, well, on the face of it, it looks like nothing out there, but there are quite a few things under the hood that look like they're about to pop off. Of course, the development of Potential Tropical Cyclone 15 being the main feature today, but also a few other areas of interest that look like they may form in the next week. It is day 140 of Atlantic hurricane season. We've got 15L there in the Western Caribbean. We're giving it 60%. National Hurricane Center a bit higher. We're not quite convinced at the moment that it's going to get tropical storm status before landfall. It's got a small window, but it will probably get somewhere. 10% out east there as well. Eastern Pacific, we've got this one area of interest as well, which looks increasingly likely to form too. We're giving that a 50% chance at the moment. I believe that the National Hurricane Center have just gone with 60% on that one in the long range. Well, in the Western Pacific, it certainly looks like trouble is brewing, with three areas of interest here, including the middle one there with the highest chances could become a powerful typhoon on its way to the Philippines, and a system to its east there, 40%, that could menace the Mariana Islands. And then we have this area of interest, which is going to start to enter the scene in the Bay of Bengal, which could become a substantial cyclone on its way towards the coast of India and possibly Bangladesh. But at the moment, it's looking like an Odisha or West Bengal landfall, could be a strong storm. And an area of interest in the South Indian Ocean, which is trying to develop 40% chance right now, because we just can't call it at the minute. It doesn't have a very long window, but it is looking quite decent on satellite imagery. Here's our potential tropical cyclone with a tropical storm watch from Belize City northwards to Tulum, Mexico. It is currently 186 kilometers from Guanaja, 216 from Roatan, 352 from Belize City, 364 from Chetumal, and 418 from Belmopan, the capital of Belize. Well, the system is slowly moving westwards, and it's got a short window before that landfall, whether or not it will manage to get the tropical cyclone status. Well, back in the studio, my name's Nathan Foy, and we've got quite a bit going on. Well, we did have a webcam up there from Roatan, which wasn't really showing us very much, to be honest. It was just a getting nighttime scene now, but there's some satellite imagery on our other panel there of the potential tropical cyclone, and we also have a viewpoint from Hopkins, Belize here as well, showing you the situation here. This could actually be quite close to the landfall location along the east coast of Belize, south of Belize City. So these are some of the areas that we're watching out for tonight. But let's take a look at that National Hurricane Center forecast cone, and you can see what their update said at the 4 p.m. advisory. We should have the 7 p.m. update. There it is, the intermediate advisory there, 35 mile per hour winds. Already, actually, as we look at that new updated cone, it's gone a little bit quicker than expected. You can tell that because it's very close to that first D icon, which is supposed to be its 1 a.m. position, Central Daylight Time. And considering that it is only 7 p.m., it is already almost there. So they're going to have to, if it keeps going like this at least, they're going to have to revise that cone faster. And its movement, they've pretty much got the track sorted there at the moment, but landfall they're expecting could be quite close to Belize City, and then moving inland they're still expecting a tropical storm, and that will be for a brief period during the course of Saturday morning/afternoon. Well, after that, it will move continuously inland into Guatemala, and they reckon that it doesn't really have any chance of developing further, whether that be in the Gulf of Mexico or whether it manages to sidle on down into the Eastern Pacific Ocean. well, it doesn't look like it's going to manage that. Here it is on latest satellite imagery, giving you a proper look at it right now, and the first thing you'll notice probably is that it's quite broad. Current wind speed 35 miles per hour. The pressure we're giving it right now is 1006 millibars. Could be getting a little bit deeper, and to be honest, it is looking quite good on this satellite imagery. You can see a little bit of a rotation going on, but still no clear signs of a center yet. Now, I must admit I haven't had the chance to take a look and see if there's any radar visualizations for this area, but and there's no recon planned as well, at least not at the moment. So we're not going to really be any the wiser apart from satellite imagery as to what this system is doing. I'm just loading up radar now actually and see if there is enough imagery or enough to show you on this, but the answer is not much. Right now all I've got is one frame, sadly, so let me just see if I can press this button. Just a minute whilst I wait for this to sort itself out. Just got to change some settings. So we've only got one radar frame at the moment. This is all we've got right now, and that isn't very revealing. So I'm not sure what we can infer out of any of that. But that is one radar frame that is currently available on the ForceCity website. It is slowly building the radar imagery, and eventually we will have a fully functioning loop, probably by the time we get to the end of this hour. So we looked at the Atlantic threat, obviously all of the other threats around the world, and we'll be watching all of those as well here. But here's some more satellite imagery that we'd like to show you right now of 15L. And it's been quite difficult to source other satellite imagery recently. Some of our sources have been going missing. But what I will take you to is what the RAM slider output is showing, and we can take a look at all of this together. So let's first take a look at the Atlantic, of course. Obviously, you've clearly got, you can clearly see both of these two disturbances that we're watching. This very broad potential tropical cyclone still looks a little bit lopsided at best on that satellite imagery. You would think that it's going to be somewhere towards the bottom left-hand side of it that would end up being the center, but it might relocate a little bit to the northeast there. It's very hard to tell. I imagine it is on a bit of an axis here. It's probably stretched from southwest to northeast, a bit like a trough almost. But whether that consolidates over the course of this evening is a wait and see. We've also got that other curious system that a lot of people have been watching all across the Atlantic ever since it was a wave moving around Cape Verde. I think that was that system that caused tropical storm force winds there, if I remember correctly. That's Invest 95L. And you can still see it producing some convection. At times it's looked quite decent, it has to be said. I've seen worse looking tropical storms on some occasions out there over the open Atlantic. So that system is a bit of a dark horse. It can't be ruled out completely, but we have given it a meager 10% chance. So the Hurricane Center giving it a 20% chance. You can take a look at that on their output here as well. There they are, 15 and that area of interest. We're very happy to see that the Atlantic is relatively quiet after recent events, of course. So there we have it. Now, any sign of this Eastern Pacific system? Well, the answer at the moment is no, because it is still a future system that we're looking out for. But here is what the Eastern Pacific is currently looking like, and we're just going to get this to animate. Now, you can see a low pressure system with convection currently bubbling up there in the middle of the frame. And I'm not sure what's happening with those frames. There it is. It's getting animated now. So a bit of a low pressure disturbance right there. It was a little bit tempting to actually mark that, but we haven't. But what will eventually happen is that something will come from behind, probably from Central America, maybe even some of that convection, perhaps a little loosely associated with PTC 15. and swing out into the eastern Pacific, probably moving, well, at the moment models signaling that it will be virtually a straight line westwards. I know in October we can often get these storms recurving into land, but this one doesn't look like it's going to do that, at least not at the moment. I may as well do my little virtual forecaster thing and just appear on the screen so you can see me talking about all of this. So there it is, that Eastern Pacific system. We've not got anything in the Central Pacific, but I was noting, I did notice earlier on that there's a little non-tropical development that could happen up there somewhere in this area that I'm pointing at right now. There could be a non-tropical low that might threaten to become subtropical, but ultimately it really shouldn't. So that's that. Let's switch to the Himawari 9 satellite and take a look at what's going on in the Western Pacific. And you may have seen in our intro there was a Western Pacific view that accidentally made it on. Well, whilst we're waiting for that imagery to load, let's show you that one. Oh, that one's... Oh, there it is. This is out in the open ocean of the Western Pacific here. Somewhere on this should be the Mariana Islands. I am struggling to see them on this map. Unless the... Oh no, it's right down there towards the bottom right, the Mariana Islands. You're just about to see Guam very close to the bottom edge of this imagery. What you're looking at here is two of those three disturbances that we mentioned. The one on the left, that's the one with a decreasing chance slightly, but we're still giving it 30%. We did give it a higher chance earlier. Then on the right hand side, this very large system that could become has the highest chance of becoming a substantial typhoon, and we can take a look at it now again on the RAM view. Here we are, we've got daylight in the Western Pacific, of course. So that one on the front end there, moving on towards the Philippines first. Well, you can see that if it did have a center, it's going to be pretty well detached from that convection, probably sheared. I can't really tell at the moment, but it looks like it's sheared. Slowly moving towards the Philippines. And then further east, you've got this much larger mass that's really doing a lot of stuff there. GFS in particular calling for that to be a very powerful typhoon. I think yesterday or earlier today it was calling for a 919 millibar peak. It's tempered its expectations a little bit, expecting I think 930s now, but other models earlier a lot more than they are now, but still some models holding on to that western system becoming also a tropical cyclone, and that might scupper the chances of that eastern system. Then to complicate things even more, on the right hand side of this, it looks like there's going to end up being a third system, which the GFS is also keen about, but some other models are too, east of the Mariana Islands, that will start to develop, push itself away from that other big mass potential cyclone in the middle, and then recurve again back northwestwards towards the northern Mariana Islands, and could be a substantial typhoon as it does that as well. So it's really all up in the air in the Western Pacific right now, but we think that something is going to form out of all that mess. JMA haven't put anything down on their charts yet. Now you can just see towards the edge here, looking out towards the Gulf of Thailand, I think it is, obviously near Thailand. There's a little bit of convection blowing up there. We're looking for a potential center to be moving over the Malay Peninsula shortly and then entering the Andaman Sea. You can see, of course, some high cloud over there as well, towards Myanmar and towards the Andaman Islands. And this will eventually become this low pressure system that we're going to be watching heading towards India and Bangladesh. Still pretty poor confidence on this one as well, but we've given it a 60% chance of forming, and it certainly looks like it could become a powerful cyclone. At this time of year, of course, we often, or have done in the past, we have seen some big storms form and take pretty much a straight track northwestwards. But only the GFS is offering that scenario at the moment. Other models are very tame with regards what happens, but pretty much all of them are actually forecasting a tropical cyclone, just that most of those other models only have it barely becoming a tropical storm. So we have a massive disagreement there, with only the GFS calling for something significant or substantial. In this case, a borderline category 3 is what they've got on the cards right now. Well, let's take a look at Meteosat 9, and that's the viewpoint over the Indian Ocean. And I'm quite impressed by this system down here. Whilst it isn't really very close to becoming a tropical cyclone, it is looking quite decent. It's had a decent amount of convection over the course of the last few hours. It was trying to get a center. Well, I think it did actually have a low-level circulation. Not looking so good in those latest frames, though, it has to be said. A couple of hours ago it was looking better, but I think that might just be the chances extinguished there for that potential tropical cyclone in the South Indian Ocean. Of course, we did already have one early system, and then we had a second depression that we marked, at least, but this one doesn't look like it's met the grade. So it's been a busy start to that season down there, considering that we aren't even properly in the season yet in the Southern Hemisphere. I don't think there's anything else worth showing you, but let me just see if some of our other imageries are working. This might not work. Let's see, what have we got here? A whole lot of nothing. Well, there's that Western Pacific view again, and we're hoping for... Nope, it's not working. We're hoping to take a look at the South Pacific, but it's not there. So we're back with the Western Pacific viewpoint there. And of course a wider view of the Eastern Pacific as well. Yep, that is up to date. And of course you can still see 15L there as well. So whilst we take a look at that for a little while, you can start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we can take your questions live on the air. Any questions that you've got regarding any of these systems, I'm sure a lot of people will want to hear about 15L, but there are a lot of them, a lot of different systems out there to talk about around the world. Now then, so Zahab Plays says that 94S was a classified depression. It may have been. I don't know if it actually was. I haven't looked at it closely enough. I think it could have had a chance for sure. And another comment says that one of our best tracks at the beginning of the year said that a track would go into Luzon. Is this to come to fruition with a powerful system? Well, too early to call on that one yet, but it does look... I mean, the Philippines looking pretty vulnerable right now with... if the left system doesn't develop into what could be a weaker tropical storm to moderate tropical storm maybe, that could strike Luzon. But then the second one behind it, if that one developed, that could become a powerful typhoon on approach to Luzon. But as far as predicting that kind of thing, I mean, that's a pretty easy prediction to make. Philippine landfalls on average, I can't remember what the stat is now, I think on average the Philippines get over one typhoon every year. And of course in the sea just east of Luzon is the geographical hotspot of the entire world in terms of tropical cyclone activity. Let's cut back to this imagery whilst we take a look at this live view of the Caribbean region. As we take some more questions. Mike says, is this a monsoonal system? I assume you're talking about this one. It doesn't really shout monsoonal to me. The cloud pattern doesn't really say it. No, but I didn't really look at its origins very much, but it's here right now, and well, its origins were much further south, weren't they? So it could have been in origin, but right now, not really very monsoonal. It's not producing huge amounts of rain near its centre. Although, when you look towards the north, you are seeing a fair amount of convection on that northern side. A really chunky band off to the northeast, very close to the Cayman Islands. and that is going to be producing a lot of rain and thunderstorms, absolutely. Do we think... Oh, okay, so we're really getting into this territory now. Stanley says, do we think that Milton was possibly stronger than 180 miles per hour at peak? We did do a reanalysis of the storm. Maybe not an entire reanalysis at this point, but a decent reanalysis, I would say. And we have gone with 185 miles per hour and a pressure of 896 millibars for the peak of Milton. There will be a track animation of that coming up relatively soon, along with Helene, which is should be out in just a couple of days, I think. A few days. We had a bunch more comments here as well. Of course, we'll be looking at models later as well. JMA think that the developing low 94W will go to Taiwan straight to Japan. I haven't seen much talking about... Well, it depends which one 94W is. Is that the... Hold on a minute. I've not gotten to grips with the designations just now. I don't take a look at the designations as much as I used to. It's the Western system. I can't see it going to Japan at all. To put it bluntly. As for but 95, that's the one further east. That was the middle one, if I'm not mistaken. No, that's I don't know what they're doing actually. I'm just looking at the RAM pages here, and it's just showing me, I think, the last version of 95W. Or is this like a completely old version here? I'm just trying to get to grips with what they're showing me on my other monitor right now. They are also showing, yeah, that is current. This is worth mentioning. They're also showing another Invest 97A. This is in the Arabian Sea. We didn't mark it, but it is looking quite interesting, or did, blowing up fits and starts of convection there. So we just look at it in proper imagery here. Without it being on the left-hand side. Just that little bit of convection blowing up at the end strikes me as interesting. This is current imagery, but this system shouldn't form. We haven't tagged it at all, and if it was forming, it would pretty much be at its peak right now. So we shouldn't be seeing anything more of that system. But of course, we've been surprised before, haven't we? Now, another comment here. One icon run showed a Goni track and a southwest movement. I mean, you say a Goni track. I mean, of course, you had to use that comparison. One of the most powerful typhoons in the region. But it certainly doesn't look like it would get that strong. It will be larger, for one, than Goni. A little bit of a southwest movement, possibly. We'll take a look at what the GFS has in a little while. And we said something could form in the Eastern Pacific, correct? Well, yes, we've got a 50% marked there right now. So in total, we actually have 8 systems that we are currently tracking. So even though we have no active tropical storms, it is a very busy tropics in a way, just that none of them are currently named. Let's just show you what the National Hurricane Center have in their 7-day forecast. You can see here they've gone for a 60% chance for this system in the Eastern Pacific, and as you can see they're pretty much moving due westward for the whole way, so it shouldn't be a land impact. 0% chance in the next 48 hours because it doesn't exist yet. And then out it goes into the Eastern Pacific. I don't think it will make Central. Let's just check the Central Pacific though. As you can see, diddly right there. There's nothing going on. So, Iona fans, you're out of luck. Now, Leopoldo says, could 94 or 95W become a strong typhoon? Certainly one of them could. I think what will happen is that the models will eventually choose one of those two systems that are close to each other. I just don't think that both of them will do it. I think it will just be one of them. But if it is the eastern system, it could get quite strong. Good conditions, I assume, in the Western Pacific over there, because usually is at this time of year, very warm SSTs, although it did look like wind shear was quite high for that western system. I will check all of that in just a second. Travel Jet Setter says that they're asking because they're going to Puerto Vallarta in a few weeks. Well, shouldn't be any problems over there, at least this week coming up, but keep watching. A Moment of Lovely, of course, there again says, is the GFS the only model that has 95W being the bigger one in the Western Pacific? Out of the global models, it is. I haven't checked the hurricane models yet, and in fact, they don't have 95W yet, so I couldn't tell you. But from the ones I've seen, it is. What I will briefly show you, though, because you won't be able to see it when we do the model graphics, we can show you what the ensembles, the GEFS ensembles, are saying. So here it is right now, and it's a little bit cut off on the bottom of our screen, but we'll try and persevere. So what we're looking at there, you can see there's actually 3 areas of these masses of red numbers just above my hand there. I can almost have them on my hand. Those 3 blobs of numbers, those are low pressure points. And what happens with an ensemble model is that they fed through, I think it's 32 or something like that, different sub-models, as it were, that feed the GFS. And all of those numbers are low pressure outputs by each of the different ensembles. So what you're going to see here over the next few frames is all of this going on, and you'll see how closely tight-knit those numbers are indicates the amount of agreement there is in what situation this is, in this case the low pressure system. So you can see there what happens with most of those is that it does take the middle system to become the dominant system. So I think that will be reflected more and more in upcoming models. It's already started that trend. It does dip southwards according to most of those, and then off it goes northwestwards, and then tons of output there, with most of those scenarios calling for at least a moderate typhoon. And then there is some disagreement there. You can see 1 or 2 of the ones that keep it further east initially actually do recurve it towards Japan. Yeah, there's at least 2, 3, maybe a few more scenarios there actually calling for it to go towards Japan instead, but the majority, probably about 70% majority at least, still taking it into the Philippines and then onto the South China Sea. Although curiously, and it's behind my head, you'll notice there that some of those ensembles actually curve north towards the end, which is very unusual for this time of year, into China, just west of Hong Kong, Macau, Pearl River Delta, and move inland that way, like a more earlier season storm would. What you'll also notice, of course, no doubt, is to the right-hand side, that second system, and tons of model scenarios there calling for low pressure all over the area. It's an absolute mess, it has to be said. So what this really tells us is there's quite a bit of uncertainty. That second one in particular, massive uncertainty about where that goes. The most southerly model ensemble pushes it just north of Luzon. The most easterly has it turning, actually going northwards from the get-go, never affects the Marianas, and heads straight out northeastwards out to sea. So a lot of different scenarios with that one. Whilst we're here, you can just, well, we'll show you the Bay of Bengal one. So you'll see here, again, at the beginning here, most of the ensembles have it plotted quite close to Thailand. And then it really starts to take shape probably Sunday morning. You'll really start to see it show up, and then off it goes. Wow, quite a lot of those model ensembles actually going into Bangladesh. I would say it's actually a majority Bangladesh rather than India. It's close, maybe 50-50 actually, but very interesting there. A lot of uncertainty still. You can see a more southerly scenario there, very close to Visakhapatnam in the eastern coast of India, into Andhra Pradesh, and then continuing inland. But if you were going to pick a center point somewhere around there, well, honestly, from those GFS ensembles, it looks like it might actually be quite close to Kolkata, moving inland. But still, lots and lots of wriggle room on that. Similar with timing as well. Those first ones make landfall Wednesday morning, which, you know, isn't that far away. But the most latest landfall there is Friday afternoon. So massive uncertainty with regard to timing right there. That's for sure. So pretty interesting stuff out of those model outputs, and we'll have a proper look at everything shortly. Let's check back in with Belize. Here's a live camera right now in Hopkins, a small town on the coast. This is one area that could get hit with Potential Tropical Cyclone 15, depending on exactly where its track will take it. Of course, I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't extend the Tropical Storm Watch further south. Once you take a look at this cone here, you'll note there that the Tropical Storm Watch extends very far north of the cone, but not really very far south at all. Now, it is possible that it will never develop tropical storm force winds on its southern side, and perhaps they've been advised that by the National Hurricane Center, the national authorities in these places. But interesting to see nonetheless. And as you can see, the Tropical Storm Watch extending very far northwards, all the way up to Tulum from Belize City. And that is just a watch at this time, because they're not fully sure that it's going to be a tropical storm landfall, but it's going to be close. And as I mentioned a little while ago, right now on that new update there, that 7 p.m. Central Time advisory, that X is very close to that first D point, which means it's going faster than expected, because that D is where it's supposed to be at 1 a.m. And of course, with it already being there at 7 p.m, after being much further east at the 4 p.m. update, well, it's going to definitely exceed that D point by the time we get to 1 a.m, so they're going to have to revise the cone accordingly. So we'll see whether it actually manages to become a tropical storm. Whilst we're still looking at that, we're going to take a look and see if we can take any more comments here. What names do we think will be retired for the North Atlantic? I mean, we don't really talk about retirements during the season. We'll probably talk about it on our end of hurricane season stream. But, I mean, use your imagination. There's going to be one or two obvious ones, I reckon. And let me just see if there's anything else that came in there as well. Is there a Fujiwara effect that happened this year? You've got me thinking now. There must have been, but already I could not remember anything that happened this year at this point already. So you've lost me on that one, but I'm sure there will have been one at some point. I mean, you could even say possibly that that there's, if both of these Westpac systems did form, then we would definitely be looking at a Fujiwara effect between these two here. Obviously, still very immature systems, so there's not much to talk about with them yet. But once those rotations build, if they do manage to do that, then they will have influence around each other. Now, let's see what else we had here. Not much else just yet. Oh, the meme god reckons Amelia and Fabio did. They were quite close, weren't they, if I recall. So, there we go. Eastern Pacific's been quite interesting this year, although not much has actually happened, apart from John. And of course, the Atlantic has been pretty crazy. Stanley says the West Pacific will likely end with below average activity again this year. Well, it has been, at times this year has been extremely slow, but in the middle of it, there's been some really busy points, but mostly pertaining to the Atlantic. But of course, the Westpac has had its moments. Of course, it had Gamey, it had Yagi, it had Krathon, and it does sort of feel as though we're going to have some kind of October system. It feels a bit like that to me. We're looking at close-up imagery right now. Latest imagery here of the potential tropical cyclone. Still, to me, it doesn't look like we've got any real signs of a center there. So I doubt they're going to be designating this anytime soon. At least, probably, unless there's a big improvement. I don't think it will be at the 11 p.m. Eastern advisory. And that means it's going to get very close to land before they actually designate it, if they ever do. Keep watching it. Seheb Plays says, have we been surprised by how many north tracking systems there have been that have had an impact? Well, not many systems have travelled that far north. The ones that have caused impacts in the Atlantic, they of course hit the Gulf. In the Western Pacific, there's been a few in Japan, of course. A very close call for Tokyo earlier in the year was that Ampil. Of course, I can't even remember what we've had this year and what was last year, but I'm sure Korea, I think, had one. So a few of them have gone quite far north, but I don't think there's been anything particularly exceptional into how far north these systems have gone this year. It's been pretty standard stuff in that regard. And Stanley says that the Western Pacific has been below average since 2020. Well, that is the La Nina effect for you, isn't it? We've been in and around the La Nina since then, and La Nina / neutral. We've not had a proper El Nino in a good while, but once we do, you will see the Western Pacific will most likely really blow up. Another comment there, can this year's season in the Western Pacific be compared slightly to 2016? Without the El Nino, of course, but the activity has been interesting to say the least. 2016 had a bit more than this season. I'm not sure. I mean, I wasn't really looking very much into the statistics and all of that prior to this stream. It doesn't ring true with me for 2016 being similar to this year. And the Atlantic, of course, has just been a white knuckle ride all the way through, hasn't it? It's been an exceptional year over here. So if you've just joined us, this is the headline tonight: cyclone threat for Belize, the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. So we're going to be looking at the models shortly, but this is a live look, a potential tropical cyclone 15, which is heading well on its way now towards the coast of the southern Yucatan and of course Belize, which will be feeling the impacts of this potential tropical storm soon, with winds of up to 40 miles per hour. So be prepared for that, and it could happen. Let's just take a quick look now at that other camera that we were wanting to show you earlier, Roatan. Of course, those islands just off Honduras. Clearly they're getting some rain there, streaking across the camera. I don't know if it's just because it's nighttime, but visibility has gone down there as well. So they're probably in a bit of a rainstorm there right now. I am seeing little bits of convection blowing up quite close by, but in general, they'll actually have a pretty calm evening, I reckon, because those winds will be getting down because they're getting close to the center, and there's quite a lot of dryness around. So overnight tonight, I think Roatan will probably not receive too many severe conditions, but there could be some strong thunderstorms in the vicinity. Now, apparently there's been 5 hurricane landfalls in the Atlantic this year: Beryl, Debbie, Milton, Helene and Francine. I'm trying to think if there's been any more than that, but I think you're right with the 5 there. It's been a relatively busy season, and people were dissing the season, weren't they, early on, saying it was a bust, saying that nothing's going to form. Even though we had, I mean, on the other end of the scale, there were some crackpot predictions, weren't there, with some extremely high numbers, which apparently everyone bought into. I mean, we predicted relatively high numbers. We started with 21, then we dropped it to 20 on our May 31st forecast, and many people thought we were too low. But actually, this is 15L, but not all of those 15 have formed. So this will only be the 14th named storm if it does happen. So we're still some distance away from even getting to the 20, and indeed we did drop our expectations through extrapolation down to 17 at the start of this month. And I think it's staying on track for, well, maybe not even that, but it will get close to 17 for this year. But of course, despite all of that, we've had some nasty storms, and once again, quality over quantity with regards to this Atlantic hurricane season, with some extremely powerful storms, and they could have been worse as well, although Helene probably ended up being a worst case scenario for those locations inland, which are still reeling from that. We don't have Crathon as a Cat 5. We have it as Cat 4 at the moment, pending reanalysis. We upgraded Yagi to Category 5 after we operationally had Cat 4. Kirk is a borderline Category 5, but we kept it as a 4 as well. Okay, we're just going to switch, pardon me, we're going to switch screens for a minute whilst we load up the latest GFS model runs, and I can tell you about everything that we've got, short, medium and long range, as we take a look at the whole world tropic scene and take a look at what we might or might not see in the next 2 weeks. 16 days is how long these models go out to. So in a few short moments, after all of those frames have loaded in, we'll be able to take a look at that. Here's some more imagery, really showing those thunderstorms blowing up in those latest frames on this PTC, and actually getting quite close to where that center would be, really blowing up some massive cloud tops there in those latest few frames. Still small scale stuff, but it might help to decrease that pressure, increase the winds, and that could bring us towards a tropical storm right there. Alright, it's loaded up 10 days so far, so I think we can start. So let's take a look at what we've got here then. And I'll hold on a minute. I'll just stick myself on here for if we need to do any annotations. So obviously the first thing you've got in the Atlantic, of course, is the 2 systems, not just the one, but obviously PTC 15. You can clearly see where the center might be, although it could end up forming here, it could end up forming here, it could be anywhere around there. And then you've got this second system here, still a low chance on that one. Watch both of these as we start to go through the model run. So very quickly there, that is a brief tropical storm. That is a tropical storm landfall, very close to Belize City actually, if not over it. That is tomorrow afternoon UTC, so it's going to be tomorrow morning local time there if the GFS is right, and that would be a landfall somewhere around 9 AM probably. Let me just go back to that frame. What are the winds? Let's see what winds they get. Ooh, okay, up towards 50 miles per hour there. That's interesting, although they're only forecasting 40. GFS usually ends up being low on these things, but quite high in that case. Watch the other system then. What does it do? You can still see it. At this point it's here, just off the coast of Haiti. Moving into the Caribbean, and nothing. Nothing at all. It completely dies off. Just want to point out, we're not going to show the rainfall graphic on here, but I'm just going to do some annotating. In terms of rainfall, we're talking about probably this area here, including Chetumal there, which could get up to 10 inches of rain. And then this whole wider area probably getting up to maybe 4 inches of rain. And here up to 10 inches of rain. So those are the rainfall expectations. 10 inches being 250 millimeters, 4 inches being around 100. Let's take a look then at what else happens in the Atlantic right through the long range. Of course, entering November at this point, so really getting towards the late part of the season. And in real terms, nothing apart from the very end. Something tries to form here, something really big and large in the Eastern Caribbean, and looks like it will end up being thrown up that way. But that is right at the end of the model run, day 16, a very, very long way away. For those watching in Europe, of course, there is a big extratropical storm heading towards the British Isles, which is causing a lot of attention as well. Look at that, hurricane force winds moving through Ireland and Scotland and towards Scandinavia. Just thought I'd mention that one. That's for the weekend, Sunday primarily, but Ireland will start to feel the effects on Saturday evening. Now, looking at the Eastern Pacific, so first of all, you've got this system that was blowing up convection that we saw on that satellite imagery. What happens to it? Very little. It does actually get a little bit better briefly, almost tries to get a circulation going. Could it be a surprise? Well, it doesn't have very long if it's going to do that. But later on, we start to see that next system. Where does it come from? It doesn't fully come from the area of interest, but it does go alongside it. And at this point, it's somewhere around here as 15L moves inland, and then maybe some transferal of energy, and then as it passes the Gulf of Tehuantepec, it starts to get itself going. Off it goes now, moving westwards, entering the 22nd, 23rd of October. There it is, continuing, becomes a tropical cyclone, tropical storm. Does it strengthen any further? It's trying to get, yes, hurricane status. 25th now, moving well out to sea, actually becomes a stronger hurricane there, Cat 2 or 3, northwesterly, and then starts to really feel the pinch there of those colder sea surface temperatures and devolves into a remnant low. Its remnants continue on towards Hawaii. Maybe a slight change of the weather there, but nothing much towards the end of that. Now, later on, at the very end of that run, there's also another massive system, well, not massive, but significant system that tries to form there off the coast of El Salvador, actually. It forms out of nothing. Look at that. I mean, that would be a late season system in the Eastern Pacific. Quite often, a lot of energy there really blows up. But that is, again, day 16. I doubt that's going to happen at this point. Western Pacific, you'll see all three of these systems. Let's mark them. There's the first one, I think. Is that even the first one? Or maybe it's more stretched towards here. The second one, the main one that we're looking at. And eventually a third one, which will appear here. It's like noughts and crosses. Let's watch what happens. So the GFS starts to, well, look at it, throws most of the momentum into that middle system. It doesn't really have anything for that other system. It's somewhere over here. But other models do develop that system, becomes a tropical cyclone over here, weak to moderate tropical cyclone through the Philippines, either with or without that second system ahead of it. But then, of course, the GFS really on board with that second system, first becoming a tropical storm, very broad at first, but then it starts to tighten up. And look how large it gets. Look at that wind field. Enormous tropical storm force wind field there, all of that green. That's 40 mile per hour winds or higher. Typhoon, and then gets stronger. Look at it go. Massive, really large. And look at it there, a major typhoon moving into a landfall in northern Luzon. Quite powerful. Moving on through, remains a typhoon into the longer range now. This is 7 days out. And then continuing through the South China Sea, still large, powerful, stalls. Does it go for that northerly turn? Oh, it does. No, not fully. Oh, it stalls a bit and it completely dies off towards the end. It reminds me a little bit of Koinu, that in that latest part of that run, and then completely vanishes. But the main takeaway there, big Philippine threat. And then that second system that forms, or third possibly, off the Mariana Islands, there is another very large system, really, relatively large. Tight core develops there into a typhoon as well over the northern Mariana Islands, mostly uninhabited, and then also becomes, look at that, a very powerful typhoon. What are those winds? And this on the GFS, which is usually usually low balls, all of this, 130 mile per hour category 4 there, probably stronger than that. Moving northwards, still strong there, 28th of October. Again, looking at those winds, close to category 4. Moving northeast, off it goes, doesn't affect any other land, well, Ogasawara probably, and then out over the open North Pacific. So that is interesting as well, but should stay out to sea. Let's also mention that Central Pacific system too. There should be a little something, there it is, non-tropical, but there's a little something there that might pique people's interest, and it does move southwards again, so it could be a non-zero chance of development for that one, and then it gets sideswiped by another system there. That is also non-tropical, I think, and it really gets swept up there. Okay, good. Well, let's take a look now at the Indian Ocean region. So the current system, if we can already pinpoint it, I don't know if we can yet, but if it was there, it's around here. And then next up, it quickly moves on. Now it's here into the Andaman Sea, and then it really starts to develop as it passes Myanmar, and then into a tropical storm. GFS on the high end of the forecast here. Look at that, a powerful cyclone moving right in there, very close to Kolkata, very close to the border with Bangladesh. It's just on the Indian side, I believe, and those winds there, major hurricane force, 115 mile per hour category 3. So a strong, relatively small storm, but strong there, swiping inland straight away there, probably over Kolkata, and then dies off very quickly actually, turns left. Briefly, that other system in the Arabian Sea, it doesn't do very much at all. Anything else in the long range? No to both of those basins. Southern Hemisphere, looking towards this little system, there's that one right now. We gave it 40% chance earlier. I'm sure those chances will go down now because it's really started to devolve on satellite imagery in the last few frames. But there it goes, moving westwards, dies off completely. Anything else in the long range? No. Australian region, we meet again. But I don't think there's anything here for you yet. Nope, nothing at all. South Pacific, a very interesting feature there. Look at this. Very long tail of storm force winds there. Non-tropical, off it goes, long gone. Nothing else in the South Pacific. Southeast Pacific as well, there's a little extratropical low there too. We've seen one or two try their luck out over here near Chile, but that one will not pass the test. South Atlantic, is there anything to look at here? Not usually, and not this time either. And just the Mediterranean region, this time of year you can get medicanes. Nothing really, just a couple of weak low pressures doing very little at all. So that is a rundown of the entire tropics. So the main stuff there, obviously 15L, that's pretty much a foregone conclusion, but potential big typhoon implications maybe for the Philippines later on. And again, let's take a look. We've got a little bit of time. Let's take a look at the 7-day rainfall totals, and they're going to get quite high over here as this typhoon hits. If it happens as the GFS forecasts it, we're looking at some very high rainfall amounts there on the western side. 52 inches, that's an incredible amount. That is about 1,300 millimeters of rainfall right there. On the eastern coast, 33 inches of rain. The major cities, Manila, of course, not very much, 3 or 4 inches, 100 millimeters, but places further north there into the mountains could get some extremely high rainfall amounts if all of that GFS model came true. A secondary area of very high rainfall over here as well. Look at that, 46 inches over that time period. Just check where we are. That's just east of Saipan. On the islands themselves, getting up to around 12 inches, 10 inches for Guam maybe, 250 millimeters, so could also get a very wet affair. And whilst we can then, like I outlined earlier, pretty similar, taking a look at the maximum rainfall, 14 inches actually on that latest GFS model, and taking a look at some of those other areas, Belize City getting up towards 8 inches, Chetumal maybe 9 or 10. South side, much drier there, maybe getting just a 3 inches on the south side. Roatan maybe getting 4 or 5 inches of rain there, 100 to 120 millimeters. But the wettest part along the Yucatan there between Chetumal and Tulum, maybe getting up to 350 millimeters of rainfall. So very interesting stuff there. Let's see if we get some quick comments then before we go to the On This Day section. Regnet Lover 22 says that they're in Jacksonville starting their 5-day cruise to the Bahamas tomorrow. How are things looking for me weather-wise? Well, we're still on the rain charts. The Bahamas, very little rainfall in the area, so it looks good. I imagine that there's not going to be too much going on in terms of severe weather or anything. Let's have a look. Calm and breezy conditions, but generally looking calm right there. And who knows, maybe quite a lot of sunshine away from that storm. Usually is on the outskirts. I'll just take a look at your weather in just a second though. Let's see what else we've got. Was Ampel a category 3 or 4? My goodness, I can't even remember now. It was borderline, wasn't it? I think it got to 4. The remixes says, is the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season above average? Long-term average is only about 12 or 13, so it is indeed above average once again. Only just at the moment. But I reckon there still could be another 1 or 2 storms on the way. I've still got my thoughts on a December storm, actually. Let's take a look at the Bahamas right now, and you can see that there's a good bit of cloud cover there. It is clearing up a little bit this evening. The southern islands looking quite good. Obviously, those 2 systems, there's that other one. Decent rotation on that, look at it. Blowing up some cloud tops. You know, you can't look away from that one, but we're still giving it very low chance. It should be dying off very soon. And then, of course, 15L, which has been the main talking point of tonight's tropical weather bulletin there. Still a potential tropical cyclone. No indication yet that it's going to become a fully fledged storm. And that is our tropical weather bulletin. I want to point out a few more things before we start finishing up here and go to the On This Day section. Game show season is starting up again, so if you want to test your cyclone and other knowledge, we have some application forms you'll want to check out. You know what? I didn't even post about this yet, did I? If you take a look at, I don't know, I've not posted about it yet. It's on our Discord server. If you want to take a look at that, it's in the announcements. If you want to take part in any of our upcoming game shows, you know, some fun stuff that we do towards the back end of the hurricane season. We're starting the episodes this weekend, so things are going to get pretty busy on that front. And we've got a few little things coming up for the end of the hurricane season as well. Okay then, what happened on this day in the wide world of tropics? Well, it was October 19th, 2016, when that season that we were talking about. We had ex-Nicole, what was left of it was approaching Greenland, but the main feature was Typhoon Haima, which was a powerful Category 5, reached 165 mile per hour winds. Sarika just about to die off the coast of China and Vietnam as a tropical storm. That, of course, being an International Space Station image of Hymer near its peak. Stunning looking storm. Well, back to today then. We haven't done a tropical weather bulletin in a good while, have we? The next name in the Atlantic is Nadine. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Christy. And in the Central Pacific, it's Iona. This is Tropical Weather Bulletin number 982 in our history. We're getting close to the 1,000 mark. In the Western Pacific, it's Trami next up. North Indian Ocean, it's Dana. And in the Southern Hemisphere, things will start up soon. In the Australian region, it's Robin. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, Becky. And in the South Pacific, it's still Pitta. Good night. We'll be back again soon.
Become an Ultimate Fan today.